Hello and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. Now, every individual makes a contribution to the world. However, there are some people whose mark is cemented in history. The reasons why they are noted down as icons, influencers, and game changers is because they have done something beyond the normative. In this conversation of impact makers, women are often overshadowed by men. It is thought that they are supporting characters and not the lead role. However, 2018 has proven that women have the power to not only create ripples, but also to bring about waves. They have the power to hold their own in a world largely dominated by men. They prove that women are agents of change. The women we will discuss today have embodied struggle and resilience. Some of these women have been faces of global conflicts, and others have stood out for shocking the world. Whether or not one agrees or disagrees with the policies of these women and what they stand for, it is undeniable that they have had an impact on debates and the global landscape. Join us in our conversation while we discuss this further. We are joined by Sabiha Shaheen, who is a women's rights activist. Thank you so much for joining us. Sabiha, the first person I'd like to talk about is Angela Merkel. She was the first female to lead a major German political party, and currently she presides over the richest economy in Europe. Merkel's most defining moments stem from her central role in managing the Eurozone financial crisis. The Chancellor has topped Forbes magazine list for the 8th year running as the most powerful woman of the year. What exactly makes her the most powerful woman in the eyes of so many people?
Thank you so much, Mishal, and I really appreciate your show that you are trying to highlight women's role in development of the world even. Yeah, these women, especially Angela Merkel, I really appreciate her, and what makes her distinguished as Chancellor, like, yes, she's a woman, but you know, she's not leading only Germany. She's leading, I think right now she's leading the whole European Union, because Germany is a powerful country in European Union, so in European countries, so she's leading the European Union. And you know, within this, I really appreciate and really like her policy about refugees. As we can see, recently we had this crisis of Syrian refugees, and the powerful country like America, even one can see the policies of Trump and how they refuse and how he talks about refugees. And in the same time, this lady, she not only she makes really friendly policies for refugees.
She has very liberal policies in the European Union.
Yes, yes.
But because of those policies, she's also come under a lot of criticism. How do you think she's holding her own in a place dominated by men?
Yeah, you're right. She has to face many criticism. And you know, whenever you talk about human rights, whenever you talk about youth rights, whenever you talk about women's rights, you have to face these criticism. So, men usually they see things very politically and maybe in terms of economics and in terms of development. But what makes women distinguished, like they have this human rights and human elements, more human elements, and that's what Angela Merkel did. So
what you're saying, Sabiha, is that their feminine qualities make them very unique, their outlook very unique.
Yes, yes, yes.
So how do you think exactly Merkel has been a force to be reckoned with in the European Union?
You know, I can't quote the name, but I know one German lady. She was in politics and she was another party. And once I met her, and she told me that even women from other parties, not from Christian Democrats, from other parties, from Green Party, they voted for Angela Merkel because of these liberal and progressive and women-friendly and I must say human rights-friendly policies. So I think whatever, she's a strong woman, and yes, and if she is. She's working as human rights activist and human rights activist. At the same time, she really increased like economy and like many other things in her tenure, in her time.
Sabiha, I really appreciate your comments regarding Merkel, but how do you think in general 2018 has been for women in politics? All over the world.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of names, and even you are going to mention those women in your program. For example, we have another very beautiful lady, Meghan Markle, and even she has made a history. She's a multicultural woman, and then she's an actress. She's from America, and now she's a princess. But I think we have to appreciate her. Even now she's a part of royal family, but she doesn't lose her ordinariness. Still, she is behaving, and she is an ordinary woman. Although it's really difficult, I know it's very, very challenging, and but still, she is with herself. So we can name her as well. And then even like the youngest billionaire of 2018, Kylie Jenner, like.
You're mentioning all these women that we have listed out to talk about. And I think since the conversation is going that way, it's worth mentioning the next person that's on our list, who's Theresa May. With Brexit scheduled to happen in March 2019, May has had a tremendous amount of weight on her shoulders. She has lost the support of many people in her parliament, and yet she sticks to her stance. She has explicitly stated that there will not be a second referendum, even though there is immense pressure. Even her critics have to admit that the position that she is in is extremely difficult, and it would be very hard for anyone else to fill out her shoes. We have a video with us of how she gave a press conference after return from the European Union. Let's take a look at that.
Yes, difficult and sometimes uncomfortable decisions have had to be made. I understand fully that there are some who are unhappy with those compromises. But this deal delivers what people voted for, and it is in the national interest. And we can only secure it if we unite behind the agreement reached in Cabinet yesterday. If we do not move forward with that agreement, nobody can know for sure the consequences that will follow. It would be to take a path of deep and grave uncertainty when the British people just want us to get on with it. They are looking to the Conservative Party to deliver.
So in this video, you can clearly see how in control May is, even though nothing is for certain. Sabiha, given this context and given what we just saw, how important is it for women in a political position, in a position of power, to remain calm, even in terms of when there are very uncertain conditions?
Look, I think I don't agree. Like, if women are different from men, and maybe they are more emotional, they are more have this feminine touch, and we think that they need to be calm. Yes, they need to be professional, but I don't think if they sometimes they express their emotions, they express their feelings. I think this is their strength. We should not take it as like weakness.
But Sabiha, in this case, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be taken as weakness. There's nothing weak about emotion. But do you think women have to battle with this stereotype that will be imposed on them if they're too emotional?
You know, I think, again, I will say if people think that women are more emotional and try to make it stereotype, it depends. Many women are very emotional, and then many women are very rational. So it depends. You can say our men, and mostly men, they are very conditioned with rationality, and they suppress their emotions. So I think this is wrong with them. Every man has to hide his emotions, and he has to show his very strong face. So I think that's a problem. It's not a problem that women should not show their emotions and sentiments and should not express like professionally or outside the houses and families. So I have really very different point of view. So I think It's sometimes, I have seen Benazir Bhutto, whenever she entered and when she came back, she was crying. Publicly she was crying. So I really like this expression. I mean, a man can't dare to cry in front of media, in front of many people. So I have seen Benazir Bhutto.
And do you think, Sabiha, you also mentioned Benazir Bhutto right here. Do you think the general public appreciates this expression of emotion?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because, everyone likes emotions. Unfortunately, our men, they don't express their emotions, but they like. Sometimes they want to cry, but they don't. They can't. This is very unfortunate part of their life. So, no one criticized ever Benazir that she cries. People like her expressions, and even that time people were like, "Oh, look at her. She's so emotional. She because she came from other country after many years, after decades." So I think it's very natural when you come to your home, your country after so long, you feel like crying. So I don't know, but I think we need to express, and this is our strength.
Sabiha, we're talking a lot about emotions necessary in the public realm, but how important is the position of women in politics in terms of policy making?
Yeah, women have very strong position in policy making, and they should play a very vital role. If I give the example of our own parliamentarians, I think we can name a lot of women, a lot of parliamentarian and legislators where they table many bills, where they table many resolutions more than men. So they are doing very well. Even right now they are doing very well. We can name Shali Rahman, we can name many other women. Even Punjab Assembly, we can name many names. So I think
we're talking about all these women. What are the main steps they need to take in order to reach that position at which they are at par with men?
Well, I think it's not about only women. If we talk about, fine, we are talking about women. So I think obviously they need more training, they need more exposure, and they need more confidence. And how they if we see our this transition of women parliamentarians, because it's a big achievement of Pakistan that we have a lot of women parliamentarians. So if we talk about before this decade, before 10 years, women were not this much confident. But now if you see our parliamentarians, even in Punjab Assembly, even in National Assembly, they are more confident because this is their third tenure, second tenure, and now they have exposure. They have, the biggest problem was with these women because mostly they were not professional. Mostly they came from different homes and they were even housewives. But their first tenure was they could not do much better. But after that, they learned things. And now they are very active. They are actively participating. But the problem is they don't have equal authority. They don't have equal...
Why do you think that is?
Because of quota. Because party thinks we have given them these seats. They did not get these seats.
They did not earn them. They were given to them.
Yeah, they are given. So I think this attitude from party leadership and from parties, this make them
Sabiha, on that point, what do you think needs to change at the end of men in power? How do you think they need to treat women for more equal rights? We've seen sexism in almost all parliaments across the world. We're seeing one of the most powerful democracies in the United States where the president is making a lot of sexist remarks against women. How do you think the attitude needs to change in terms of how men perceive women?
I think women need to change themselves. I think no one gave you your rights. You have to take your rights. And I think if women are strong, if women don't care about these comments, sexist comments, and if women can face this kind of what you say, insult or humiliation, and can face and can reply then they have to stop it. I mean, if we expect, okay,
Sabiha, hold on to that thought. We're also joined with Ismail, who is a human rights activist. Thank you so much for joining us. Gulalai, could you tell us what is your opinion about the fact that women need to make sure that they get their rights, no one's going to give it to them?
Thank you so much for taking me on the show. I'm a big advocate of women speaking up for their own rights and women organizing themselves to ask for their rights, because we have seen that if women do not organize themselves and women do not ask for their rights, usually the society do not care, because if we look at the state, how the state operates, the state is in itself is very patriarchal. The state institutions, we have seen that they are very patriarchal. But when there are strong women rights movements and when women keep on speaking about their rights, those women's voices can push the state to defend women rights. In Pakistan, globally, we have seen that there are women rights movements behind anything which happens for the sake of women rights. This year we have seen, like in 2018 and 2017, we saw that a whole new global movement emerged with the hashtag #MeToo movement, after which many women from different fields, they came out and they were speaking about harassment, the issue of sexual harassment, and the whole issue of sexual harassment came into light, and many people were persecuted for being perpetrators of sexual harassment.
Gulalai, your point is very important, how women are taking ownership of public spaces and they're making sure that their voices are heard. Since our show today is about women who have made a splash in 2018, the next person I'd like to discuss is Meghan Markle, who is the first colored person to enter the monarchy, first divorced woman to enter the monarchy in England. In May 2018, her wedding took place and almost 1.9 billion people watched the royal wedding across the world. But because of her wedding, she has had to make a lot of changes in her lifestyle. She had to retire from acting, she had to close down her social media accounts, and she also had to limit her public engagements. Gulalai, I want to ask you first, what impact do you think her marriage, Prince Harry, has had on the monarchy?
Big fan of royalty, and I'm not a big fan of monarchy. I think that these symbols of monarchy, they do not belong in the modern world. And when I see the world cherishing that how one ordinary woman became part of the royalty, I think this discussion do not belong in this century, because royalty does not belong in this century. This is an era of democracy, and if I would like public taxes to be spent on anything and public money on anything, I would really like that the public money, rather to be spent on royal weddings, the money should be spent on increasing healthcare, access to people who cannot afford healthcare, increasing education for those who cannot afford education. So I think that for the dream, the vision that I would like to give to ordinary young women of Pakistan is not to wish to become a princess so that they can live a better life. I would like women of Pakistan to see Malala Yousafzai as their role model, who strive for her rights and who even put her life in danger to speak up for the right of education. I would like them to see Tanzila Kambrani as their role model, who is the first.
But at the same time here, Gulalai, we have to remember how Meghan Markle entering the monarchy did in fact change the nature of it. I mean, it is a big deal because a first colored person coming shows a huge change. Sabiha, given that in the UK and all across the world, right wing is on the rise, and Meghan Markle almost symbolized multiculturalism, how important do you think her entering the royal family was?
I think I agree, Gulale, and Gulale has pointed out rightly that this is not era of monarchy and stuff like that. But as I mentioned earlier, that this is a big change. For example, this monarchy, this royal family, has to accept a multicultural woman, an ordinary woman, an actress and model woman, and she entered into a royal family. This is a change, and this is how change happens. For example, before her, Lady Diana, she has made a history. For example, she was a royal family, but she did so many things which royal family women can never even think about doing.
She broke through the conventional mold.
Yeah. So I think this is also a change. And as I have mentioned earlier, although now she's princess and she has to quit many things, but still like the kind of stuff she's doing, and even her social media presence and her views about different things. So this is a big change. So I appreciate her role, and I appreciate that woman. She, although she's a part of royal family, but she is maintaining her individuality and her ordinariness. So I appreciate
and Sabia, you mentioned Princess Diana here, also Queen Rania in Jordan. She is seen to be very active, mingling with the public. So how important is the role of these princesses and queens in monarchies?
Well, look, I know what you're talking about. Obviously, these women won't challenge monarchy, but at least they are changing something. Even Queen Rania, I'm a big fan of her. And, obviously they can't say that monarchy is wrong and it should be finished, but at least they are doing many other things. And this is how I think things will change. And as Gulale pointed out rightly, like we have a great role model of our Malala, our beautiful young girl Malala, and we have many other women. Like we can quote them, but
we're going to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. We're talking about women who made a splash in 2018. We're joined with Farzana Bari, who is a human rights activist. Thank you so much for joining us. Farzana, before going to break, we were talking about Meghan Markle and all the other women in the royal families across the world who are creating and breaking the mold. How important do you think Meghan Markle was in terms of bringing multiculturalism into the monarchy?
I think it certainly sent a positive signal, especially societies, where we see that increasingly racism is on the rise, right-wing politics, I think, and the right-wing tendencies in the West are also on the rise. So I think under this sort of a larger context, these individual acts of individuals, who are high profile or who people look up to, or those kind of role models, and if they are marrying or they are having relationship, across various cultures, so this kind of cultural, diversity, it does, I feel that send us a very positive signal to the society. However, since racism is a much deeper phenomena, it's not going to go away, or this multiculturalism is about a mindset, about the acceptance in a society where you accept and respect diversity and difference. Because we have increasingly seen how women who are covered, for example, in France or in other areas, being attacked, the Muslim women who are, you remember a couple of years ago, a woman on the who was attacked. She was on the beach, and she was fully covered and things like that.
But so it is a very interesting contrast to see how it is a very interesting contrast to see how there is a rise of the right wing, and then this happened.
Yes, because it is in a way quite an individual act, I mean, you fell in love with someone, okay, since he is a prince, so that's why we are talking about it. I mean, there are many individuals, for example, in Western societies where people from multicultural societies, people do get married to each other. But I think that does not mean that the larger phenomena of racism or the kind of the lack of tolerance for the difference and diversity, which we increasingly see globally. It's not only happened, I think it's happening in the Western culture as well, that increasingly you see the racism and that sort of intolerance towards multiculturalism is also is there. These are the trends, which are we see increasing rather than decreasing in the West as well. So I think in a way, I'll say, yes, we appreciate, although monarchy itself is a kind of a institution, we don't believe in that. But so it does send, I would say, overall, I will say it does send a, kind of a positive signal. It does create a legitimacy of the people who can be, who can live or share their lives, cross culturally with other.
In the year of 2018 is Dr. Christiane Beasley Ford, who is seen as a form of resistance. She was seen to be a woman who accused Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, who is now in the Supreme Court, of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Her trial went on for a couple of weeks, in fact, and more than 20 million people watched it in the United States alone. Many people all around the world watched it. Gulalai, what do you think was the importance of Dr. Ford's allegations at this point in time when we saw the Trump administration being allegedly being very sexist towards women?
I think that Christine speaking up against harassment was very important for women who are in the power. When Christine spoke up, what she made clear to the world that women, even if they are in the Senate, even the very powerful women, they are facing harassment. And it also, I think, opened up the ugly face of the truth to the whole world, that even how people, men who are acceptable to the Supreme Court, even when they are accused of harassment. But Christine, she became an image of powerful woman who, in her position, who took the risk to open up to the world and speak about her experience. And her experience has, I think, encouraged many women to speak about issue of harassment when they face harassment in their personal life or in their workplaces.
And I'd like to show a video of when she took the oath, which was to stir sentiments all across the world. Let's take a look at it.
Yeah.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. I have described the events publicly before. I summarized them in my letter to Ranking Member Feinstein, and again in a letter to Chairman Grassley. I understand and appreciate the importance of your hearing from me directly about what happened to me and the impact that it has had on my life and on my family.
That was a video of Dr. Ford, who was giving her testimony in the court. Sabiha, I want to put the same question to you. What do you think was the importance of her coming out in a time when the Me Too movement is rampant?
Mishal, maybe I have a different point of view, because I think women need to learn speak up. And I know it's really difficult, it's not easy, but I think women should speak up the moment someone tries to harass them.
But in this issue as well, we saw that she spoke up and there was a complete trial, and yet the person she claimed was responsible for harassment went scot-free. What can you tell us about the trend of women speaking up and them not being believed?
Well, you're right, but again, it will take some time. But we have to start this. Like, I know even you have to face many things from your own home. It's not an easy job. I know this is a very debatable thing which I'm talking about, but I'm talking about what I think and I believe and I do. I want to tell you, whenever someone, like, it doesn't mean like I'm not facing such things, but whenever someone tries to harass me, I try to do something. Immediately, I spoke against this. I raised voice against this. I know even I have to face many things, but I never ever spare. Even in my whole life, I never spare even a single man if he wanted to do something and he tried to do something. Even on the street, even on a road, sometimes I attack on people.
But Sabiha, why exactly is it so important to speak up in terms of creating a more safe environment for other women?
Yeah, but you know why? How we will get this safe environment? When we will raise this voice, when we will say we are not safe, because we are hiding things now. We are not telling that loudly that we are not safe. We will tell we are not safe. Then this environment will be created. Like, no one gives you things. You have to take, you have to ask, you have to demand. If you want food, you have to ask that I need food. So I think, I know, it's it's very difficult what I'm talking about, but I believe so. And I think this is a solution that women have to raise voice against this harassment, against this discrimination, against this, I know that you have to face a lot of things. And that's how things change. That's how things change. If we want to change this environment from our maybe daughters and for our next generation.
Thank you so much, Sabiha. Let's move on to a woman who won the Nobel Prize in 2018, Nadia Murad. Nadia Murad was a victim of war crimes. She refused to accept the social codes that require women to remain silent and ashamed of the abuses to which they have been subjected. Murad and about 3,000 other Yazidi women have been kidnapped and sold into sex slavery by ISIS in 2014 as a part of the terrorist group's genocidal campaign to wipe out the religion's minority. We're joined with Fawzia Waqar, who works for women's rights. Thank you so much for joining us. Fawzia, how important was this win for Murad?
Well, Ms. Murad was able to highlight the torture and slavery of women in crisis situations such as Syria and elsewhere in the world. We have similar situations, although we may not have internal civil war, but women are subjected to violence. Women are subjected to torture every day. Highlighting this violence against women is extremely important. And I'd like to say that violence against women is perhaps the most difficult challenge confronting women today. Even more troubling is the fact that more and more women are accepting and normalizing this violence. They don't speak against it. So women like Nadia Murad and all, they highlight that acceptance is not okay. Justification is not permitted. And we need to stand up and fight for our rights. We need to speak about them if we want things to change.
And on that note, we have a video of Nadia Murad giving a speech in the UN. Let's take a look at that.
When I was here last December, I testified about crimes, the crimes of the so-called Islamic State committed against me and against the Yazidi community. I told you of how ISIS attacked my village of Kocho, how they rounded up all the men and killed more than 700 of them in one day, including 6 of my brothers.
Fawzia, so we saw here Nadia giving a speech, and all throughout history, we've witnessed women being victims of war crimes. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, absolutely. Women experience war differently from men. And you will see that in wars, usually women are subjected to sexual crimes. The objective is twofold. One is to inflict punishment on who is seen as a perpetrator or as a rebel. The other one is to dilute or destroy the next generation. So the objective of rape and other sexual assault crimes is to ensure that that generation, or the Yazidis, for example, their race is diluted, and the genocide, it takes the form of a genocide, whereby it's an attack on a particular group. It's an attack to change the composition of the group. So women, not just in, like I said earlier, in the case of war-torn countries, but in other places also, have been subjected to sexual crimes and have been made to suffer so that their men can be humiliated and that their next generations are made to look different. And they are diluted.
About this concept that women are assaulted so that their men are humiliated, how problematic is that?
Well, it's not just about, it's not a matter of honor. We tend to sometimes confuse the matter of men being humiliated with honor. It's not a matter of honor. It is about seeing your near and dear one being subjected to the ultimate humiliation, the humiliation of rape. Rape is an intense and the most cruel crime which affects not just the physical body of the victim, but also her mind. It destroys her completely. So therefore, it is a very calculated crime. And throughout history, we have seen that rape as a tool of war has been used to obliterate races. So it is a very significant thing, and Ms. Murad has spoken up against it. She's been able to bring it to light. The sad part is that it is not given the same kind of attention. If you look at the war in Kosovo, if you look at the Yugoslav crisis and all, rape was forever used as a war crime, and it was only many years later that the UN system took notice of it. So we need such crimes to be highlighted more often and faster.
And do you think this was the first time when the international community finally gave a woman the courage to come out in this way? Well, she came out for her own courage, but do you think that they awarded her instead of the stigma that has often been attached to a woman coming out?
Well, fortunately, things have become, started to look a little bit differently, that victims are not blamed. You know, the concept of blaming the victim, which has forever kept women shut, has been changing a little bit. It has been giving way a little bit.
I also want to get your opinion on that. Do you think victim blaming is changing in societies?
Well, there are some examples where we have seen that women have started coming from a position of power rather than coming from a position of victim. As we discussed about Dr. Christine Ford and then also about Nadia, who shared their experiences and who opened up to the world by coming from a position of power, by believing that by sharing their experiences, they can change the things for other women, and by not taking blame for what happened. Though this is true that even today, even when harassment happens or when sexual abuse happens, women are blamed for it. Weaker are blamed for the harassment rather than actually pointing out towards the perpetrator and actually putting perpetrator into justice. That when incident of sexual assault happen, we blame victim for it, and even if we do not blame victim for it, usually victim is the one who is in the limelight rather than perpetrator. And that attitude needs to change. We need to bring the perpetrator in limelight to shame the perpetrator. So that, and also to bring them to the justice. I'm very interested in this discussion because when Nadia shared her experiences, she opened.
Hold on to that thought, Gulalai. Fawzia, how do you think women are gaining success in coming forth with their claims? Do you think society is becoming more supportive of them?
Well, it depends on which country you're talking about. Many societies are still not ready to deal with women coming out and talking about their experiences. And the victim phenomenon is very much alive. For example, if you take the Me Too movement, you saw that not just in Pakistan, but in developed countries, as we call them per se, like the United States, etc. also, this was seen as denial of the rights of men. It was seen as a calculated mass drive to shame men or to disadvantage men. So there are fewer people, even at this point in history, who are able to understand the issue and to do something about it.
But wasn't that a very weak rebuttal made by men that this, of course, is to shame them and now they are confined, they don't know what harassment is? Wasn't this just a very weak rebuttal and it didn't have much substance?
You know, the problem is that you and I may think it's a weak rebuttal, but if you talk to decision makers, and because we deal as the head of the Punjab Commission on the Status of Women, we deal with violence against women in all forms. Sexual harassment, cyber sexual harassment are two of the biggest areas that we deal with. You will see that the mindset is very much the same, that if a woman is subjected to sexual harassment, it is her own fault. And that there are very, very few men who are going to come out and say that, yes, it's not okay and that we need to deal with it. And
Fawzia, that is a very important point, and that is something that needs to be highlighted, of course. But I want to move on to the last personality we will talk about today, who is Ahad Tamimi, a 17-year-old Palestinian girl who spent 8 months in an Israeli prison for slapping 2 Israeli soldiers. Let's take a little look at the video which shows her slapping these soldiers. So Aad was seen slapping these soldiers almost an hour later after she found out that her 15-year-old cousin had been shot by Israeli soldiers. Fawzia, what importance does this person have in giving a human face to the war that's going on in Palestine?
I think Mimi was single-handedly responsible for giving a human face to the Palestinian issue. Every day we saw men protesting. We saw the Intifada. We saw, Israeli soldiers firing at the Palestinians and the Palestinian boys and men. They throwing back, pelting the Israeli soldiers with stones. Yet it was seen as a travesty by the Palestinians and not by the Israelis. So Mimi was able to, her agitation, her protesting, her demonstration to the opposition, Israel's expansion into the Palestinian settlements, that brought to light what it really means, how a 15-year-old girl gets impacted. She was able to document, she was able to organize protests against the Israeli occupation. So I feel that, this young girl had the courage to stand up against this vast machinery of the Israeli state and bring that innocent human face that we shudder when we see, and we can all relate to, and we all are turned to do something about it. So I feel that she was a very significant woman. She really made a splash in terms of bringing a human face to the Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians.
Gululai, how important do you think Ahad's activism was?
I think that no child should be put in this position where they see their young cousins dying in war and where they feel the responsibility to resist against military forces.
Thank you so much, Gululai, for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you. Fawzia, I'll take my last question to you. So Ahad Tamimi's story also shed light on the fact of how many minors are being affected by the war. Almost 300 minors are currently being held by Israeli prisons. Can you tell us just a little about that? And then we're going to end the show.
When Tamimi's case was brought to light, the plight of those minors was made more visible. That is when people realized that Israel was not just dealing with this evil Palestinian force as the propaganda maintains, but also these little kids who may not be the hijab wearing, the other Muslim kids. These are kids who are like all other kids. These are kids who could look like a European kid or an American kid. They could look like anyone else. Those were the kids whose plight was brought to light by Israel. And unfortunately...
Fawzia, for joining us. We're running time. It was great talking to you. That's all the time we have with Indus Special today. We hope to see you again next week.